Chogyal Lodro Gyaltsen, to give him his full name, was the fifth of the five founding masters of the Sakya tradition. He was born in 1235 in Sakya itself. And he was therefore the great-grandson of Sachen Kungin Rinpo, the first of the five great masters, and the nephew of Sakya Pandita, of course, the fourth of the great masters. So he grew up in a... by this time, the time he came along, the Sakya tradition was really flourishing, great reputation as a center for both meditation and profound Dharma studies, with inheritance of many, many tantric teachings from India. And then Sakya Pandita had come and stamped his distinctive brilliance on the tradition, showing that the intellectual study of Dharma and the deep contemplative practice were not opposed, were not antithetical, in fact relied upon and reinforced each other. So that was, in a way, the stamp of the Sakya tradition into which Chogyal Phakpa was born and which he carried on. So, as a young man, he was very much associated with his uncle, Sakya Pandita. I mean, his father, Zangsa himself, was a good master, but Sakya Pandita was a much greater spiritual and intellectual influence on Chogyal Phakpa. And so what set the direction of his life and activity very much was that the connection made with the Mongols, the Mongol Empire, which was, of course, just coming to its great power at that time. Already during the lifetime of Sakya Pandita, the Mongol Khan, Goden, who conquered China and who, in a way, exercised external power over Tibet without invading it, and of course controlled much of Asia. Goden Khan summoned Sakya Pandita to the imperial court in China, or Karakoram, I think, first of all, to, in a way, negotiate a deal for Tibet. And the Sakya Pandita was the most prestigious figure in Tibet as the greatest Lama. And then he was the one who represented Tibet. And it's made this connection so that the royal court from then on would be very interested and well disposed to Buddhism, and Tibet itself would not be invaded by the Mongols. They become a tributary state, but not invaded. So Chogyal Phakpa went there with Sakya Pandita as a young man, a young boy actually. So he's having his education, he's receiving his teachings, philosophical teachings, from Sakya Pandita and other accompanying masters, and getting many tantric transmissions from Sakya Pandita and other masters, including Kadampa masters too in that. So that by the time Sapan dies in the early 1250s, Chogyal Phakpa was still very young at that time, in a way seen by the Mongol court, as the representative and the head of the Sakya tradition. Of course, he belongs to the Kern family, that's the ruling dynasty, and is Sapan's closest disciple. And so he steps into that position and becomes, in fact, in time, the guru to Kublai Khan, who becomes the new power after a while in the Mongol court. So he's the Lama as a young man, he's the Lama to Kublai Khan. And he bestows upon Kublai Khan and his wife, Chabi, who is particularly devoted to him, the initiation of Evadra and other teachings, thus solidifying this connection between Sakya tradition and the Mongols. At that time, actually, Kublai Khan said to Chogyal Phakpa, because you're my imperial preceptor, I could say that all Tibetans must follow your tradition. But Chogyal Phakpa rejects that and says people must be free to follow the religious tradition of their own inclination, according to their own karma. So that cannot be. I don't want to accept that. And also Chogyal Phakpa's influence is very great on Kublai Khan, so he's able to argue against capital punishment and to stop every 12 years there was a slaughter of Chinese people being carried out. That was stopped. So Chogyal Phakpa was able to intervene and modify the kind of political and social policies of the Mongol rulers. And effectively, he spends most of his time in China. He travels back to Tibet two or three times, to Sakya, with a long journey, of course, of several months, meeting and giving teachings to people on the way, and composing very important texts on both sutra and tantra teachings. But in fact, some of his most influential and most memorable texts are epistles that he wrote to his royal disciples, because not just Kublai Khan, but also other Mongol princes become his disciples. So one of his famous texts, the Garland of Jewels, is written for a Mongol prince. Another of his most famous works is the Jalpo Ladampa, the Instruction to the King, which is Kublai Khan, of course. So it's mainly through these shorter texts that Chogyal Phakpa's Dharma inheritance is preserved, as well as the fact that he held all the various tantric lineages, which he then passed on to his disciple, Shangdrakpa, and through him the Lamdre, the Vajrayogini teachings and so on were preserved. Tragic, well, it's tragic, but Chogyal Phakpa dies relatively young, actually. He's only 45 when he passes away. But at that time, Sakya is really at its most powerful in Tibet, because although there's no insistence that everybody in Tibet follows the Sakya tradition, in effect the Sakya tradition were the regents of the Mongol emperor. So again, the lamas themselves don't rule, but they appoint lay rulers to be like the viceroys over Tibet during that time. So that's part of the work Chogyal Phakpa carries out. So a really important person for us. And when he's depicted, he's usually depicted in paintings and tankas holding a wheel to symbolize that his kind of supremacy in both spiritual and secular matters. Because in effect, he's a king. Chogyal means Dharma king. Chogyal Phakpa, the noble Dharma king. That is the meaning of his name. And that Sakya political power, alongside the spiritual power, will last for another 50 or so years after Chogyal Phakpa's death.